So let me ask you, what do your insiders say about uh, off-planet guidance? Is that part of the game? Is there
Oh,
a
definitely. Definitely.
alien group that's, I
We're,
mean,
we're constantly
we know the UFOs have kind of disarmed all of our nukes. So they're clearly, interacting with us. The military is admitting all of this. So what is going on here?
Well, the folks I talk to that are involved in what you call special access or unacknowledged programs, what I'm told is that a lot of what happens on Earth actually comes from about 3,000 light years away from here. And let me explain what that means. Because there's going to be a lot of people watching this, or they'll either laugh at this or they'll make some sort of remark in the comments because maybe this is outside of their spectrum of understanding. But essentially, a lot of folks that are in government already, they're scientists on our planets, they contain a little bit more to them, that you might say, whatever you want to call them, hybrids and different versions of humans that look just like you and I, but they've been placed in a position of influence on purpose. And these folks could appear very, very normal, but they all have different agendas. Now, as much as some people want to believe there's one big happy galactic federation up there where everyone are holding hands and waving flags, it doesn't work like that. I'm told that's a very human construct. It sounds very nice in the movies and in television shows, but the actually point in fact, there are all sorts of folks influencing us. In fact, this might be hard for people to wrap their head around, but the concept we have of time is a very limited one when we look at what we call lineal progression. And we can get into this on another show about how a photon, which we're learning more about that now on the different states, but a photon exists in a dual state as a particle and a wave. There are different ways we can affect time. And you might say that there are folks in the future that are affecting things that are happening now, and they're changing our reality. And there's folks in the past that are trying to put stuff forward. And you can say it's like a Japanese sword maker putting layer upon layer upon layer, that the algorithm for reality is actually quite complex, as strange as that's going to sound to a lot of people. There's a lot of events happening right now at the same time in quantum multiplicity. And the fact is that some of these folks, the extraterrestrial folks, they have time travel capability. They can change us on many different levels. So they all have different agendas, and they might help certain groups on Earth, certain governments. China has groups helping them. The Germans had groups helping them. America had groups helping them at different times and giving them technology and seeding them. And everybody's kind of getting help in different areas. And you might say that there's a lot of meddling going on. And there's one large group, let's just say, we're just going to say group loosely, that wants to see us go forward. They want to accelerate us. They believe it's time, it's ready. And you got another group that wants to slow us down, that doesn't think we're ready. So it's a very complex matter of how we're being influenced as we're going on this path. But overall, you get this collective that says, hey, well, these are changes that we want to see as a whole. And I want to say this about the extraterrestrials, is that there are folks that watch us, that that are looking over our progress. You might call them the gardeners of the planet. And you might say that nothing, as I'm told about this, nothing goes extinct on this planet. Nothing goes extinct on purpose on this planet. It is part of a plan, something that has been looked at. And for example, the dinosaurs, they ran their time on the planet. They were taken off. And I assure you that there is a version of them that you'll find one day that is on another place that they've been moved to that's more suitable. And it's just like us. I'm telling you right now that we are getting to our own maturation point, where it's getting pretty soon when we have to mature, that it's our turn to grow up and to evolve to the next level. Some have called that all kinds of terms, ascending and, maturation points. but it will be time for us to move. And the descendants of the human race, you're going to find them in different parts of leaving the planet. That's going to start happening in the next 45 years. You're going to see by 20, even as soon as 2045, you'll start to see groups that are leaving the planet, and we're moving out into different places. So the extraterrestrials play a very big role in that, Jay.
Yeah, it's like that's the plot of the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Wow.
Alien intervention makes the apes into man, and then the alien intervention turns man into another creature, the Star Child at the end of the movie. And the Star Child is coming to change the planet, the first of his kind, and is really, really part of the secret society that is, I think, behind all of this, which is the Brotherhood of Saturn, comes out of Germany and France, and they have they're very well organized, and they're claimed to be in contact with ETs, just like you're saying. So
yeah, well, they all have for a long time. They've been here. I mean, speaking of the secret societies, you remember Adam Weishaupt when he started the Bavarian Illuminati on May 1st, 1776. He originally wanted to call the Illuminati the beekeepers, just like the coin of Ephesus. And don't ask me how I got that, but the beekeepers that they had, or the guys in the Masons, they have the honeybee as their symbol. The Christian king Charlemagne did. They all have had this symbology. They've been here for a very long time. And
Merovingians.
Absolutely.
Had to be, yeah.
Well, look at we could get into a bit of the ancient stuff now that we touched down on that, because we have some related knowledge that is an incredible knowledge. A friend of mine, he's a very dear friend of mine. His name is Timothy Hogan. He lives up near where you are, and he is a Grand Master for the Knights Templars. And I hope you don't mind, I can give a plug for an upcoming tour we have also here. But I just got back from doing a tour in Egypt with him, and we're working on some upcoming forbidden knowledge historical projects that are really cool. But we have another tour coming up, by the way, that this one is called Initiation into the Mysteries of Egypt. We got some great people coming. If you want to come to sabatours.com, you can check us out. We have a tour next year in March. It's going to be very esoteric, very mystical. But we also, and by the way, I'll be in October coming up. If you want to join us, I'll be with Muhammad and Nassim Haramein for this Resonance Academy tour. You also check that out also. But the one thing that Timothy has ingrained into me is that when we look at the Templars, look at the symbology of the three that they use in many different places. And you see that just like the trident of Atlantis, that the Templars, when they started out in the Crusades, they started out in one area, and then they moved, they discovered the secrets of Atlantis. And they became fully focused on the mysteries that were in all these various places, and they started opening up into that. And that's why they started focusing on Egypt.
Yeah, I'm just talking about that right now in my other show. I'm reading from my book, A Monument to the End of Time. I'm on the Templar history right now, how they came out of the Order of Sion on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, and they actually ruled Jerusalem under the kings. I mean, they were telling the kings of Jerusalem what to do. It was the complete opposite. And yeah, they excavated under the mount, and they discovered something. We don't know what, but immediately alchemy enters Europe. Immediately cathedral building begins. I mean, the whole, like what you're talking about happening now, the Templars consciously reset Europe at the beginning of 1,000 years ago, just a little less than 1,900 years ago. They reset Europe. They somehow they got control of a massive amount of wealth. The church never built the cathedrals. It was always the Templars that financed them. They were inspired by the mosques that they saw in the Middle East, and they learned the alchemy behind the architecture. And yeah, the Templars are like the most amazing group ever.
It is amazing. And, when we get into the story, let's say, of Albert Pike in Freemasonry in the United States, in the Southern jurisdiction, everyone always goes, oh, morals and dogma, that Pike had written. People have tried to vilify Pike. I think Pike was a genius. The guy was brilliant. He was translating all sorts of different languages. He was translating the Zohar. He was translating things from Latin. He was definitely beyond his time, but the material he had was greatly taken from Eliphas Levi, the
Right.
French transcendentalist. And people don't realize this, where all the stuff later that came from the Golden Dawn, the magical tradition, as well as the stuff that you saw over with Pike. And this is stuff you can talk to Timothy Hogan about, is that this was all because Napoleon, he was obsessed with the Templars. So he goes into the Vatican. He's the one guy that pushed through the Vatican libraries and the catacombs. You want to say everyone goes, oh, the Vatican library, no one's looked in there, must have the Library of Alexandria in there. He went in there and he said, screw this, I'm going in there. And he went and helped himself. And it was Eliphas Levi's job to take out all the good stuff and extract it and write it out. And it was disseminated through the history of magic and everything that came out through Levi. And I know you could definitely say more about that, because you looked into Napoleon, right?
Yeah, Napoleon was super fascinating. Of course, Stanley Kubrick spent 20 years trying to develop a bio of Napoleon, and he ultimately failed. And that got me interested in Napoleon. Why was Kubrick so interested in Napoleon? And then I discovered that Napoleon is really the fulcrum of history in some ways. He went for the secrets. He was going to let the secrets out. I think that's why they imprisoned him and eventually killed him. And I'm not saying he was a good guy or anything. I'm not saying that, but he's like one of the most interesting people in history for sure.
Yeah, and he did a great favor to Egypt, actually, as much of a usurper, that some say,
Yep.
he gave himself the 33rd degree title. He comes in there. He brought with him savants, artists, and people that were reconstructing the ancient past of Egypt. But as of lately, I've been coming into so much more information, and I've been presented with classified information about Egypt, some really exciting stuff that we're going into. And some of that actually came out of when Timothy and I were in Egypt. Really amazing stuff. And some of the people we had ran into, and what I discussed with him, is that when you look at Egypt and you look at the Great Pyramid and we look at the Giza Plateau, a lot of people, even to this day, some people that claim to be the most knowledgeable Egyptologists, and probably someone watching here, they'll turn this off and say, what do these guys know about Egypt? But they will say to you that the Great Pyramid, which we call Cheops and Khufu and all that sort of stuff, they'll say it was built in the 4th dynasty by this 25-year-old king, could barely tie his own shoelaces. And they say that he built this thing as a tomb. Well, just statistically and mathematically wise, when you look at the millions of stones that are in there and how they've been built in their perfection, I mean, needless to say, it's an impossible task, even by today's standard. You do have to be moving things and giving people bread and grains and guys to take care of those guys, around the clock, and doing this meticulously. And it's just statistics wise, it makes no sense. So what I've been told,
Robert Bauval pointed out that if you're going to drag the stones up to the top of the pyramid with slave labor, you would have to build another pyramid outside the pyramid.
Yes, it's exactly right. It's an untenable argument that people make. So what's really interesting about this actually is, when you look over at the Giza Plateau, there's more and more and more they keep revealing under it. And I'm not just talking about the Osiris shafts that you can get a permission to go to. I'm talking about deep areas that go under there. And it's actually, point in fact, very classified what has been found underneath there. And there has been various military operations and groups that have gone under, and it's never talked about. And some recent information that I have about this is that, of course, we know the Sphinx is older than the top part of the pyramid, but underneath the Giza Plateau, there's, of course, all kinds of moon temples and structures, because that part is far older. And something I'm going to tell people today that is very interesting, that we want to get this information out, is that the top part of the pyramid was built later. If you want to talk about who the pre-cataclysmic Egyptians were, you could look at the temple that was built underneath the Great Pyramid, that there's another structure underneath it. And that basin part of the pyramid existed before the top part of the pyramid, and it existed far longer. And some interesting things I want to share with all of you, because there's so much more that we could say about this on another show. But the takeaway from this is that when you go look at the BS that they tell you about Khufu or Cheops, this goes back, if you go back into the 19th century, it goes back into Colonel Weiss, who was, again, when you look at the British when they were there, here's a guy that wanted to, get paid for being there, wanted to speed operations up. He's up there and he,
blowing things up.
Yeah, exactly. He goes up there and he goes, hey, I need to have some kind of evidence that suggests that who built this pyramid, because we're looking through it. And he forges the name of Khufu. And he not only does that, but he uses red ochre paint, which you can't carbon date. And he even misspells the name Khufu. He was already busted for forgery twice. And this BS idea that even like Herodotus and others may have had, because when Khufu was around, he was looking for who built the pyramid. He was looking for the pyramid texts, that the Book of Thoth, which had the secrets of how to do these things. That's what he was looking for. And so people attribute this falsely to him. Well, interestingly enough, and you guys can do your homework on this, go back to 93 and 94, when Rudolf Gattenbrink comes to the Great Pyramid from Germany. He brings a robot up in there. And when he brings a robot up in there and he heads up there, he starts to take this robot with a camera and go up. When you go above the Queen's chamber, above the King's chamber, there's another area that goes up in there. And he goes up in beyond the Grand Gallery. You've seen it before, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the crazy thing, here's a crazy thing about this that people have probably never heard, Jay. This is just mind blowing. He goes up in there and they see this red writing on the ground and everywhere. And this is legit. And no human can get up there. We needed a robot. Whoever built this later on, these structures, which I'm going to lead up to who I believe they were. When they went up there, the antiquities at the time during the 90s were scared, because what happened is that all their top hieroglyphics experts, everyone comes out, and you can look this up. Go look the old articles up when they first made this discovery. It says there's an unknown text. It's not hieroglyphics. We don't know what the hell this says or who left this there. We have no idea, and it freaked them out. And
so back up here just a second. You're saying that the Ganterbrink put his little robot camera up the shaft, and on the shaft walls of this little shaft, which is not an air shaft, by the way.
Yeah,
are what, like building mark languages for, or what?
Well, that's what happened with that, according to Timothy. So Timothy, my friend, he is a world-renowned symbologist and expert in ancient languages, as well as masonry and a bunch of other things, right? He was brought in as one of the experts on the teams that they consulted. And he said, I haven't seen anything like this. In fact, the closest thing we see a resemblance to is the ancient Vinca, which I'm going to get to in a second. If you guys want to do your homework on who the Vinca were, this will all start to make sense to you. So when we look at this, the language there, the antiquities freaked out. And they said, look, our hieroglyphics experts, everyone says this is not Egyptian hieroglyphics. But whoever built this left these writings in here inside that. We better shut this up. So they had another press release. You can look that it came right after those press releases on routers and everyone. and said, oh, we've decided these were probably just builder's marks on measurements, but I'm told that was BS right from the start. That was total bull. And so what that was is that the group that built the top part, whether you want to call them pre-dynastics that came in after the cataclysms, they had built this area up. And when you look at who the Vinca were, when we see that similarity, we see a relation to the ancient Hungarians or the ancient Chinese. And look at the mummies you found in China. And you look in the 5 autonomous provinces of China and what's over there within the, if you look at the Tamalian aspects and those mummies and the giant pyramids they've covered up, there was another group, and we can call this group the descendants of the Denisovans. They were very tall, Asiatic looking folks. And if you look at the later depictions, like the Asiatic eyes that you see in the ancient Egyptian depictions, we see that then you see the differentiation in the dynasties or the dynastics. But those moon temples under there that existed there, along with the Sphinx, this is a very ancient civilization with cycles upon cycles, right?
Yeah. What do you think of the idea that actually what we think of are shafts and underground stuff is actually a giant stone city that's been covered up by sand?
I think you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And here's another thing. We know that, for example, the myth of the dying god, which is very, very ancient. And we might say that that comes from the northern Indian migrations, the groups that were up there. And you can call them whatever you like. You can go by all sorts of ancient names. They bring in the tradition of Osiris. Osiris was introduced in about the 4th or 5th dynasty, which, by the way, Akhenaten in his time, he wanted to do away with Osiris and Anubis. He didn't want to do away with all the gods. He kept all the other gods. He just did away with that initiatory process. The alchemy and the stuff that we see from that was mentioned in the secret caves over at Mount Harob, that was from the 4th to the 19th dynasty in that very particular bloodline. There were certain things introduced into Egypt, but we do know that Khufu or Cheops was looking for something called the Book of Thoth, an ancient book that held all kinds of secrets, if you want to say alchemy and everything else.
Yeah.
And what do we call that?
That's what the Templars were looking for.
That's exactly right. And what do we call that book today? What do we loosely call that book?
The Emerald Tablet.
Correct. Now, this is something that Timothy blew my mind with. Timothy Hogan, again, brilliant. I love him. You need to have him on the show. He's brilliant. I mean, he's got an alchemy lab. He's written about it. He's got some great books, Element of Elements. So he said to me, you know, in the alchemical process, not only do we have the Red Lion, which I know you know about, written by a Hungarian author, right? But we also know that it turns into these little green emeralds in the alchemical process. And so this is a way of saying, hey, this is an alchemical text. You have the distillation and a process described, and you have the refinement of, you know, the sun and the moon in the Emerald Tablet, you know, the all is mind, you know, those hermetic principles. But in this process, which is also really cool, is that one of the guys that we could talk about if you had time, that came out of your area, your neck of the woods in Colorado, he was talking about that. You know, do you remember he went by the name Doriel?
Oh yeah, Doriel, right? Yeah, he wrote the other Emerald Tablet, kind of a channeled work, right?
Well, there's a few ideas we get. Have you heard of George Hunt Williamson?
Yes.
We
quite familiar.
Yeah, well, he's the guy, and Jordan Maxwell used to tell me this when he had talked to, who's the guy that did Indiana Jones again?
Spielberg.
Who?
Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg, and the other guy that he was with, George Lucas. That's it.
Yeah.
So when Maxwell used to talk to them, they said that Indiana Jones was based on George Hunt Williamson. And this guy was so wild that he was living in Colorado. He was an anthropologist, a university professor that dressed like Indiana Jones. He would go out into the jungles and do all these adventures. He was an esotericist, an alchemist, a Templar. That's who they based the real Indiana Jones on. He was the real Indiana Jones. He was obsessed with the versions of the Emerald Tablet, but he was also an ET contactee. And he was receiving communications.
Are you saying that Doriel was George Hunt Williams?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Wow.
And so the crazy thing is that he was obsessed with this subject as well, and the versions of the Emerald Tablet and translating them. But at the same time, people don't realize this, that the stories that you get about a George Adamski and Orthon and all that ET stuff, this came from Adamski. He was from George Hunt Williamson. He was also getting communications on a radio. He was the first to talk about the 12th planet and Marduk. Before Sitchin, before Van Doniken, all of them, there was George Hunt Williamson.
Yeah. Well, the Doriel version of the Emerald Tablet is pretty interesting, especially the stuff about the dark beings that walk among us and control us. Wow. Really close to the archons in their description. Really, really good stuff. I have to say, I really like Doriel's work, and I did not know it was George Hunt Williamson.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's an amazing piece of work. But when you've looked at the Emerald Tablets, did you find that you looked more at the Hermetic wisdom of them, or did you see the alchemical keys?
Yeah, they have the alchemical keys. They're that's the emphasis on the sun and moon is light and dark, and the interplay between serotonin and melatonin, and how it all works together to create, your body as an alchemical vessel. And it says very clearly at the end that the secret is just within the sun, and that's what the Cross of Henday says. And we have to really understand our relationship with the sun, and that the sun is the gold that can turn things into gold, and that gold is just God with an L, So and L is lead. So the thing that makes God a terrestrial mineral is the lead. The thing that weights it down, holds it down, the gravity, which is what lead exemplifies. So yeah, it's incredible. I had no idea. If you guys, I'll put a link to the Amazon where you can go buy Doriel as a book. It's actually worth having in your library for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned beings that were there, dark beings talked about in that version that we're watching behind the scenes.
I'd like to read that. Go
ahead,
like
the archons. Think about the movie John Carter and the folks on Mars that were there. Think about invisible masters and folks behind the scenes that were monitoring their progress, and ask yourself what they were getting out of the deal. They were almost feeding off the energy of the people like a louche, and how these beings were operating behind the scenes. And then do your homework about who wrote that book and what else he wrote. And then you're going to get yourself some interesting questions to ask.
You've just ignited something. At the time that John Carter, the movie, came out, I had known it was Disney. I think their most expensive movie at the time that they ever made.
Yes.
I think it was 300 million. I can't remember. Close to something like that. And then I went to see it, and I yes, it's a corny science fiction movie, but it's got this underlying story about these archons that is a big part of it. And then the movie got squashed, completely got squashed. Like, I saw it when it first came out, and then it was gone. I don't know, maybe a week or two later, it was gone. I couldn't find anyone who had even seen it. I said, "Did you see this movie?" And they go, no, I never even heard of it. And they even named it wrong. It should have been called John Carter of Mars. Then
Yes.
you'd be intrigued. Who's going to want to go see a movie called John Carter? Nobody, right? Who's John Carter? I don't know, right? And yeah, so that movie, and by the way, I think the writer director, his career's over. I think that was it for him. I think he went too far in that movie. I really did.
It was a great movie, but they revealed a lot. And
Yeah.
I think everybody should watch that movie and check it out,
Sure.
and then come back with new questions. But there's
Great.
that just shows you that the world is not what we think it is, and we are not what we think we are. And the world isn't as important as we think it is. And I want to leave people with this, Jay, to think about, because I've been reading a lot of old Manly P. Hall lately and just really meditating on it and going into it. And the idea, when we look at who we are as a spirit and a soul, when we journey here, we project out our consciousness and the ego and the personality. But according to the Eastern theosophy and what we take away from all this, we only carry that consciousness, the spheres of consciousness in our experience with the personality just far enough back until we can drop it again, absorb the experience back into the soul. So everything that we're telling you today, all these great mysteries and ancient things in the world, or where we're going on, in a way, the world of illusions is all for our amusement. But at the same time, we can't take the ride too serious, as Bill Hicks used to say, right?
Yeah, Alex Jones did say that. Oh, I didn't mean to say that. Well, Johnny, I think that's a great place to close out, because it's an optimistic way to get out of here. And the future is not in stone. It's a fluid thing, just like the past is not in stone. It's a fluid thing. And the more we discover about the past, the more we know about ourselves. And that is the whole point of learning about the past, is that we can learn who we really are. And it's a much more fascinating story than anybody has ever related. The real story has never been told about what's going on. And so much stuff has been forgotten, just like the Templars. So much has been forgotten about the Templars, how they built those cathedrals, how is it possible to take an agricultural society and turn it into a dynamic society that built over 500 cathedrals in 300 years? These are like important questions that nobody's asking. And so I really appreciate having you on, and let's do it again.
Let's do it again, Jay. And please, everybody, can you check out my website, www.johnnyenoch.com. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming tours and conferences. And make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. And also subscribe to Jay's new platform when it rolls out. Thank you.
Yeah, do that. And I'll put a link up to your site there. And thanks for joining me, Johnny.
Thank you, Jay. It's always fun.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jay Weidner. This is Reality Check. Hit like and subscribe and tell your friends, and help me grow the channel. And we'll bring more and more programming to you of this nature. Hope you liked it. Sayonara. This is Jay Weidner, Reality Check, and we're starting a membership plan for content that we don't normally want to put up on some of these platforms, and I want you to join. We're not going to stop doing the regular shows. We're just adding content. Be a lot more one-on-one stuff with me, and I think you guys will find it really interesting. So we'll put it up here below, how you can get into the membership plan, and please join. I'm Jay Weidner, and thanks for watching.